Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ed Hartley. I'm the Vice Principal and High School teacher here at Moose River School in the Clavik Northwest Territories. Today my presentation is on changing technology in our classrooms and how it affects instructional designers. Can you imagine 15, 20 years ago of telling your students that having something like this in their classroom and being able to use, they probably think you're crazy. I remember the first bit of technology I used in school, a Commodore 64 back in the late 80s. And we thought it was great. We got to go in and play games, we got to learn how to type. Today it's not like that anymore. We don't teach kids how to type and how to use computers. They already know. And a lot of times I have trouble. I ask some of the kids in class, hey, what do you think is wrong with this thing? How do we fix it? And usually be able to come up with the best answers possible. I decided to do my presentation today in my classroom just to get an idea of, get a little sense of the spirit of change that's going on. And even here in my classroom, I find it difficult sometimes to find the right kind of technology to use. And that change is happening more and more as time goes on. Today we can use technology in much broader and different ways, and it's reaching our students and our learners in a lot more different ways than it has in the past. There's a shift and a change that's happening with learners in all situations, whether it's adult learners here in high school, even younger kids. I'll give you a good example. I have a 3-year-old son. He was sitting on my lap while I was doing some of my schoolwork for this course there a week or two ago, and he kept reaching out with his finger on my desktop and kept swiping the computer like that, the computer screen, making all of these smudge marks all across my computer screen. And he's looked at me and he said, "Daddy, it's broken." Because he's so used to one of these things. Right? Touching it, moving it, being tactile and learning from it. At 3 years old, actually when he was 2.5 years old, he can go bring up his own games, put on his door shows, turn that off, swipe it off, bring up his ABCs and his coloring games. Don't even have to tell him what to do. Can you imagine being able to do that 20, 30 years ago? So what does that mean for instructional designers? Some of the research that I found for doing in my paper was quite interesting. Today businesses use it quite often. If you think of an oil company, for example, or an exporting company that has offices that are all over the world, and they do training with their employees or with their managers on a regular basis, the cost savings that they ensued because they don't have to send somebody to go train them in all these different places. They can have one teacher teaching from one spot through either e-learning or an online program. So creating those kind of courses is vital to the future and success of education as a whole, not just the school systems, but any kind of learning situation. 21st century skills, it's a new term and a new idea that's sort of been around for a little while, I guess, but it's a new skill set that we require, or society requires of our learners to have in order to be successful in today's work field. It's not just about can I fix a car? Can I install plumbing in a house? Can I make architectural drawings? The infusion of technology into those areas, those workforce, it's inevitable and it's going to happen and it's going to change as time goes on. Instructional designers must take into consideration the implications of changes that are occurring. When technology changes so rapidly and so futilely as it has been in the last few years, it's going to have an effect on how people learn. Access to information. Our high school students now, how can we as teachers teach something and give them questions to answer and problems to solve when all they have to do is take out this thing here and then within seconds they can answer any question that you can put to them. But here's the key. How do we design courses and incorporate information processing and data management, and how do we use that data and that process? That's the key thing. Is making sure that in our designs of our courses that we incorporate how to use that technology in the best possible way. Designing a course that's to be universal in design. You want to put out an open line, an open source course like a MOOC. How do we design that so that everybody can take it and it means something to them? Which can be challenging, because if you think about context of educational situations, it can be different from one place to the next. Teaching a high school math course, for example, or a social studies course in downtown Toronto, we may be doing the same kind of outcomes here in this classroom, but the context is completely different. An instructional designer will have to take into consideration things like cultural values and cultural beliefs, common knowledge that people have. We have students here that have never driven on a divided highway before, have never been to a mall, right? Never been bowling. All these common knowledge things that we take for granted sometimes as Southern people doesn't always apply. And you have to take that in serious consideration when you're designing courses or programs. So with these online courses, I mean, they're designed to close that gap and those distances in geography in a lot of cases. For this example exactly, I'm 10,000 kilometers away, but I'm still able to do a course that's on the eastern part of Canada. You can expand that even more, because if you think about if I can do it, then somebody in Japan can do it, somebody in Norway can do it, somebody in India can do the same course. Providing that the flexibility and the design of the course allows for people in different time zones and different backgrounds can be all-inclusive into that course. So this poses a bit of a challenge or an issue to instructional designers when they're trying to come up with the best kind of model to follow when it comes to designing programs such as these. Choosing methods of designs or design models can be challenging, especially when you talk about geography. And as I said, geography not being just physical distance between, but it's also the context and the aspects of who and where you were teaching those students or those learners. A good example would be, even though I'm here in Aklavik, 10,000 kilometers away from CVU in Sydney, I'm an East Coaster. And I guess I'm drawn to, like many of the people in this class, are drawn to Eastern universities because we all have something in common. We all like to have something familiar. And a lot of times the courses are designed around that similarity and that standardized way of thinking. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what if we start reaching out to students that were in different countries, spoke different languages, and their English isn't quite so good? How does the context change then? For here in the Northwest Territories, culture is a very big aspect of what we teach and how we teach. We're expected as teachers to make sure that culture is incorporated into all of our lessons in some way, which can be challenging, especially for somebody that's from down south, what we call down south. So some other research that I came across, very interesting. There's this study done where a bunch of instructional designers were surveyed. Interestingly enough, they had said that the ADDIE model, ADDIE model, was the most commonly used, and mainly because of its generic properties. It's very straightforward. The ADDIE model allows a designer to take a sophisticated program like a virtual online classroom and be able to accommodate for the differences in traditional models and this modern type of classroom, modern type of learning. Also, instructional designers like the ADDIE model in the way that they can change the process and make it work based on a very generic and a basic understanding of what a model should look like. ADDIE refers to analysis, design, develop, and implement, as well as evaluate. Those are the 5 key areas of the ADDIE model. When it comes to creating online courses, need to take into consideration things like infrastructure and cost when it comes to learners, especially in a K-12 system. Here's a good example here in the north. Our board region, the Beaufort Delta region, we have 9 schools, 7 schools which are spread across the outlying areas, 2 of which are in Inuvik and the larger area. 5 of those 9 schools are actually only accessible by either boat or bush plane at certain times of the year. So that makes it a bit challenging when it comes to maintenance and infrastructure of our schools. If we're trying to upgrade our systems and our building itself just for internet capabilities, it can be quite costly, especially when you think some of the more northern communities like Ulakto and Sax Harbor. Same with Tuktoyaktuk and Paulatuk, and here in Klavik. Just to fly in, it's hundreds of dollars just to fly into our community from Inuvik. Not to mention shipping costs. We're trying to upgrade our computer systems and the wiring and things in our school. I mean, there's always a shipping cost that's extra, more than what the southern school would pay, because we can't just run to Walmart to buy cables and iPads and things like that. We have to have those things shipped. And a lot of times, I know today we have lots of free shipping online and things, but it doesn't always apply to isolated communities like we live in. Just to wrap up some of the issues that I talked about today, when it comes to instructional design, there are a lot of issues surrounding changes in technology and the way our classrooms work to how courses are designed. It's very important to remember when designing courses that it's not just about the physical aspects of your classroom and when your learning styles of your students. There's much more into it, much more to it than that. We have to consider geography. We have to consider all the aspects of geography, not just physical space, but language used and cultures and educational beliefs that are different from all different places of the world. Also, flexibility of the courses, being able to be inclusive and allow for students to manage their own time is also very important. Cost is a very big important. Infrastructure. Access to the internet. It's not the same for every community, and even just in Canada, there's a very, very big difference between, internet access in Nova Scotia and Ontario and Alberta versus some of the more isolated communities. And all these challenges are brought about because of the change in technology these days. As areas grow and grow their infrastructure and their internet capabilities and their speeds and access to information, it sometimes takes a while for that to filter through a lot of the isolated places. IDs need to be able to manipulate and accommodate their design models when they use them to design courses and programs, whether it be for business, whether it be for educational purposes. Changing technology is a global trend and has no sign of slowing down or stopping anytime soon. Instructional designers must take into consideration the implications of all the changes that are occurring with technology and in their classroom and the skill sets that learners have, and what that means for the design process. As interest and access to online programs increase, so does the issues that go along with it. The context of learning environments are much more varied as time goes on, because as the technology grows, our expansion globally also increases, and when you expand into global markets of information, potential participants for all these online courses, people are coming from all corners of Canada and the world. Choosing methods of design or design models can become much more in-depth and much more sophisticated as the dynamics of learners' abilities change over time. As we move into the future with instructional design, instructional designers are learning now that one particular model of design isn't going to work. Elements of different and varying models need to be incorporated in order to facilitate the types of courses and the modern day courses that are necessary.